Voltaire, born in Paris, France, François-Marie Aret, on February 20th, 1694, was born the youngest of 5 siblings of his father, François Aret, and his mother, Mary Marguerite de Mard. His father was a lawyer and his mother was seemingly unemployed, although she was of French nobility. Moving forward, Voltaire got his education at the Collège Louis le Grand in Paris, where he studied Latin, theology, and rhetoric. Later in life, he became fluent in Italian, Spanish, and English, and by the time he was leaving school in 1711, he realized that his passion in life was to be an author, although his father wanted him to become a lawyer. Hoping to please his father, Voltaire worked as a notary assistant, where instead of working at the notary, he would often skip and spend most of his time writing poetry. His father found out about him skipping work and sent him to study law at Caen, a commune in France, but the young Voltaire continued to write, producing essays and historical studies. Voltaire's wit made him popular among the aristocratic families who he often mixed with, and this was the beginning to his rise in popularity within the upper class, and the beginning to his literary career. In 1613, his father forced Voltaire to work as a secretary for the French ambassador in the Netherlands. During this time, he would fall in love with a French Protestant refugee by the name of Catherine Olympe Donnier. They would end up moving back to France by the end of the year. Over the next 5 years, Voltaire's publishings would increasingly get more popular, although this would eventually be due to his detriment, as due to his criticisms of the government, he would have troubles with the law, which as a result, he was sentenced twice to prison and once to temporary exile from France. One satirical verse in which he accused a government official of incest led to an 11-month imprisonment in the Bastille, a guarded fortress in Paris. In November of 1718, Voltaire would debut his play Oedipus at the Comédie-Française theater in France, where his play was met with immediate critical and financial success, which solidified his reputation. Voltaire was even rewarded with medals from King George I, and he would eventually die at the old age of 83 when he became ill in May of 1778. If you Google Voltaire magnum opus, the first result is his book released in 1759 under the name Candide. A brief summary of the book is that Candide, the main character, lives in a German castle where he eventually falls in love with the Baron's daughter and is evicted for this. While kicked out, Candide learns that the castle was raided and everyone was either killed or captured. This is until he discovered an old philosopher that used to teach him, and the girl he fell in love with survived. The girl was sold as a sex slave to 2 Jews, but Candide kills them and sets her free. Due to him being a murderer, they flee to South Africa in fear of getting in trouble. They find the Baron there, and still opposed to his love with his daughter, Candide murders the Baron. The group find the land of El Dorado, where they amass a great wealth and jewels, and with the philosopher's advice, they decide to live in a secluded farm where they grow bored of their stale life. Their neighbor tells them that there is fulfillment to be found in working on the farm. They do live a fulfilling life on the farm and live free of philosophy and religious quarrels. One of the main themes and morals of the book are optimism and how it's slowly diminished in the characters throughout the events of the book. An example of this is when they go to Africa, they encounter a sugar slave who is missing an arm and a leg. Candide is almost unable to comprehend this misfortune, as he can't understand why or how God would seemingly and unjustifiably punish one of his own. Another message for optimism in life is that if humans have free will, that means they choose whether they are happy or not. Although this happiness takes work to achieve, and one cannot sit around and wait for God to bestow this onto you. Candide achieves this happiness through the farm at the end of the book. Another large and important theme of the book is religious intolerance, and as I said in Voltaire's biography, he is often criticized and rebelled against religion. Voltaire mocks Christianity's intolerance to other religions in the story when 2 characters in the story die. The Christian is buried in a beautiful church while the Jew is tossed to the streets. These themes are common throughout the book, as Voltaire wrote anyone in the story who defies the church to be morally upstanding and nice, while those who believe in it are rude and not nice. Taking another shot at nobility and wealth, Voltaire writes to those of lower classes nicer, more forgiving, and more understanding than those with wealth and status. This leaves implications that money and status have no correlation with how nice you are. The last thing worth noting is how money doesn't buy you happiness. Throughout the story, when Candide increases his financial wealth, he has more feelings of loneliness and sadness than what he did before.
Voltaire's influence is not a direct one, although everything he believed in and was opposed to are super modern ideas, and it's hard to remember that he lived in the 1700s and not more recently. A good example of this is Voltaire's views on slavery. Even judging in Candide, when they encountered the sugar slave, it's obvious that Voltaire was opposed to slavery, as Candide shows empathy. Voltaire was under the belief that everything was created by God, and therefore all humans are related, such as black people being cousins to white. Therefore, no one could treat their relatives more horribly, which is an opinion totally ahead of its time, and this was his thinking in the mid-1700s, where slavery wasn't abolished until 1865, over 100 years ahead of his society. Another one of his indirect influences that we feel in modern day is his thoughts on the church not being tolerant of other religions, which was also a prominent theme in Candide. Born on February 20th, 1964 in Paris, France, attended school from 1704 to 1711 at Collège Louis le Grand, moved to Netherlands in 1713, had his first play, Oedipus, debuted at the Comédie-Française theater, November 1718. Imprisoned in the Bastille, April 1726. Moved out of Wandsworth, England, from December 1727 to June 1728. His play Zare was published in 1733. Moved to Holland in December 1736. Lived in Brussels from 1739 to 1740. Banned from Paris in January 1754. He completed and published Candide in 1759. An apprentice Freemason on April 4th, 1778, and died in Paris, France, February 1778.